My stepmother made me work 60 hours a week at 15 while her sons got allowances. So I ran away at 18, built a $500 million company, and now they're all applying to be my employees. Our family grows with your support. Hit subscribe and drop a quick comment sharing your location. It makes this journey even more special. I was 15 when I realized my stepmother hated me. Not the polite distance kind of hate. The visceral, bone-deep kind that made her lip curl whenever I entered a room. It was a Tuesday evening when everything crystallized. I'd just gotten home from my second shift at the diner, my feet screaming in my work shoes, grease still clinging to my hair. The house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic bread, comfort food I wouldn't be eating. "Laura, finally," Denise said from the couch, not looking up from her phone. My stepbrothers, Stephen and Devin, sat on either side of her, controllers in hand, playing the new PlayStation game they'd gotten just because. "The kitchen's a disaster. Clean it before you even think about homework." I stared at the mountain of dishes. "I've been working since 3 o'clock. I haven't even." "Don't talk back to me." Her voice was ice. "Your father works hard to keep this roof over your ungrateful head. The least you can do is contribute." Stephen snorted. "Yeah, Laura. Some of us have important things to do." He was 17, hadn't worked a day in his life, and somehow that made him superior. Devin, 15 like me, didn't even look my way. He'd gotten his allowance that morning, $200 for existing. I'd made $73 in tips that day. It was already gone, tucked into the coffee can under my bed where I kept my escape fund. Dad married Denise 3 years after Mom died. I was 12, still raw with grief, still reaching for a woman who'd never answer again. He'd met her at some conference in Atlanta, and within 6 months she'd moved in with Stephen and Devin. "A fresh start," Dad had said, squeezing my shoulder. "A real family again." What he meant was a replacement he didn't have to grieve with. The changes came slowly. First, Denise redecorated, erasing Mom's presence room by room. Then came the house responsibilities, chores that somehow only applied to me. By 14 I was doing everyone's laundry, cooking dinners, cleaning bathrooms. When I complained, Dad looked at me with tired eyes and said, "She's trying, Laura. Meet her halfway." Halfway meant I started working at Murphy's Diner the week I turned 15. Denise had orchestrated it, talking to the owner about how I needed structure and purpose. The money went toward household expenses. Denise collected 70% of every paycheck. Room and board, she called it. Stephen's car insurance, Devin's gaming subscriptions. That's where my labor went. I worked breakfast shifts before school, dinner shifts after, doubles on weekends. 60 hours weekly became normal. My grades slipped from A's to B's. I stopped seeing friends. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. And through it all, my stepbrothers coasted. Stephen was applying to colleges that fall. Expensive ones. Denise hired a consultant for $5,000 to polish his mediocre essays. He'd never held a job, volunteered nowhere, played no sports. His Common App bragged about his entrepreneurial spirit, because he'd sold some sneakers online once. Devin was worse. At 15 he'd perfected weaponized helplessness. "I don't know how to do laundry," he'd whine when asked. "The dishes make my hands dry." Denise would coo and excuse him, then turn to me with steel in her voice. "Laura, handle it." I'd watch them sprawled across the sectional while I scrubbed their crusty plates, and something dark would bloom in my chest. Not quite hatred, something colder. Calculating. One night, Stephen left his laptop open to his college portal. I saw the tuition numbers. $68,000 annually. Dad and Denise were paying it all. I'd been asking for $40 to replace my work shoes with holes in the soles. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Laura," Denise had said. But apparently it grew on Stephen's entitled ass. That night I added another $50 to my coffee can. It held $823 now. Money I'd hidden, lied about, fought for. Every tip I'd underreported, every birthday dollar from my grandmother that I'd claimed to spend. It wasn't enough yet. But it would be. February brought black ice and consequences. Devon crashed Dad's car, wrapped it around a telephone pole while texting. He walked away with a bruised ego. The car was totaled. "These things happen," Denise said, stroking Devon's hair while he milked sympathy from the couch. "Cars are replaceable. You're what matters." Dad nodded, exhausted from his double shifts at the plant. "We'll figure it out." They figured it out by taking my paychecks entirely for 2 months. "Emergency situation," Denise explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Family pulls together." The coffee can beneath my bed held $1,040 now. I'd stopped reporting half my tips entirely, claiming slow nights. I started walking 3 miles to school, another 2 to work. The Georgia heat made my uniform stick to my skin. My feet bled through my socks. When I asked about getting Dad's old bicycle from the garage, Denise said Stephen needed it for exercise. I never saw him ride it once. That's when I started stealing food from the diner. Just small things, rolls I'd pocket, fruit I'd slip into my backpack. I told myself it wasn't really stealing. Murphy paid me $4.25 hourly, below minimum wage, because I was a minor and he knew I was desperate. Called it even. My maternal grandmother, Nana Rose, lived in Savannah. She'd call weekly and I'd stretch the phone cord into the hallway closet, speaking in whispers about anything except the truth. But Nana had raised Mom. She knew evasion when she heard it. Spring break, she showed up unannounced. I came home from a double shift to find her Lincoln Town car in the driveway, Nana on the porch with a suitcase and a locked jaw. "Baby girl," she said, and I burst into tears. Just collapsed right there on the steps, still smelling like fryer grease and broken dreams. She stayed 3 days. Watched Denise order me around like hired help. Saw Stephen and Devon sprawled useless while I worked myself ragged. The second night I woke to raised voices downstairs. "She's not your maid." Nana's voice carried. "That child works herself sick while those boys of yours. I house my rules." Denise's response was cold. "If you've got complaints, take them up with your son." I would if he'd grown a spine since my daughter passed. Dad said nothing. I learned later he'd stood there silent, letting Denise fight his battles. When Nana left, she pressed an envelope into my palm. $2,000, she whispered. "Don't you tell anyone. When you're ready to leave this hell, you call me." I never got the chance to call her. Nana died 6 months later. A stroke, sudden and cruel. The money stayed hidden. My escape fund grew. 17. Senior year started with college applications I filled out in the diner's back office during breaks. I applied to 37 schools, every single one far from Georgia. California, Washington, New York. Distance was the main criteria. I'd need full rides. My college fund had been redirected to Stephen's sophomore year expenses. Denise found my acceptance letter from Berkeley in March. I'd hidden it in my history textbook and she'd been snooping for God knows what reason. That night she waited until Dad got home, then staged her performance. "Berkeley." She laughed, sharp and cruel. "Honey, that's adorable. But who's going to pay for that? You've got no savings, no college fund. You think waitressing is going to cover Berkeley's costs." "I got a full scholarship," I said quietly. "Full ride. Room, board, everything." The look on her face, I'll treasure it forever. Pure shock, followed by rage she couldn't quite mask. "Well, you're not going. You're 17. You need parental permission and—" "I turn 18 in August," I interrupted. 3 weeks before move-in day. I don't need your permission for anything. Stephen looked up from his phone for the first time. Laura got into Berkeley? I didn't even get into Berkeley. Because you're a C+ student with no work ethic, I said, my filter finally gone. I worked 60 hours weekly and maintained a 3.9 GPA. We're not the same. Dad finally spoke. Laura, that's enough. No, it's not enough. It's never been enough. Nothing I do is ever enough. They made my last month's hell. Denise increased my chores, added a curfew that made keeping my diner shifts nearly impossible. She'd lock the door at 10 p.m. sharp, forcing me to sleep in my car, a '98 Civic I'd bought from a coworker for $500. It barely ran, but it was mine. June brought graduation. I walked across the stage alone. Denise had forgotten to take time off work and Dad's plant had mandatory overtime. Stephen and Devon were at some gaming tournament. Nana Rose would have been there, dressed to the nines, screaming my name. Her absence carved a hole in my chest. Murphy, the diner owner, attended. 73-year-old man who'd watched me grow up across sticky tables and grease-stained aprons. He hugged me hard after. Your mama would be so proud. You're getting out. Not soon enough, I whispered. July 4th, everything exploded. Denise announced a family vacation to Miami. Stephen, Devon, Dad, and her. My 18th birthday was July 20th. We'd be gone right through it. What about me? I asked. You're working, Denise said. Someone needs to pay bills while we're gone. It's my birthday. You'll have plenty more birthdays, Laura. Stop being selfish. She handed me a list of chores to complete while they were gone, along with Stephen's and Devon's laundry. Have this done before we return. I looked at Dad. He was examining his phone with intense focus, avoiding my eyes. That's when I knew he'd never stand up for me. Not now, not ever. They left July 10th. I had 10 days alone in that house, 10 days I'd been planning for months. I called Murphy, quit the diner with 2 weeks' notice compressed into a gracious lie about family obligations. Then I systematically packed everything I owned. Clothes, documents, Mom's jewelry Denise didn't know existed, my coffee can of savings. Now $3,800 combined with Nana's contribution. I took other things too. Small petty things that felt like justice. The expensive coffee maker Denise loved? Sold it on Facebook Marketplace for $200. Devon's barely used gaming headset? Another $150. Stephen's designer sneaker collection? I photographed the nicest pairs, listed them online, and scheduled meetups for after I'd left. $800 right there. The night before my birthday, I deep cleaned everything on Denise's list, did it perfectly. Then I took photographs, time-stamped, location-verified proof of completion. I knew she'd claim I'd destroyed the house somehow, and I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. July 20th, I woke up 18 years old and free. I loaded my Civic, taped an envelope to the refrigerator with a single word, goodbye, and drove west. California was 2,600 miles away. I had $4,700, a car that threatened to die hourly, and a rage that could fuel cross-country travel twice over. I didn't look back once. Berkeley was overwhelming. Rich kids with safety nets, legacy admissions, people who'd never worked for anything. I was taking 18 units, working 20 hours weekly at the campus library, and learning computer science like my life depended on it. Because it did. I'd chosen CS strategically. Tech meant money, meant power, meant never being vulnerable again. I lived off campus in a closet-sized room, ate ramen religiously, and coded until my eyes burned. Freshman year, I built 3 apps just practicing. Nothing special but functional. One tracked expenses, another organized scheduling, the third connected students with textbook exchanges. Sophomore year, everything shifted. My roommate, Jasmine Lopez, was a business major with venture capitalist parents. She saw my expense tracker and said, "This is actually good. Like really good. My mom's been looking for something like this for her company's employees." 3 weeks later, I was pitching to actual investors. My hands shook so badly I could barely control the clicker. But the numbers spoke for themselves. I'd tested the app with 200 students, refined it based on feedback, and demonstrated genuine market need. They offered me $50,000 for 15% equity. I negotiated up to $75,000 for 12%. Jasmine's mom laughed and said, "You're going to be dangerous." I was counting on it. Finance Flow launched junior year. It was my expense tracker on steroids, AI-powered budgeting that learned user behavior, predicted spending patterns, and offered personalized saving strategies. We targeted young professionals drowning in student debt, people like I'd been scrambling for control over their financial lives. It exploded. 6 months post-launch, we had 200,000 users. By senior year, 2 million. I dropped out second semester, not because I was struggling but because I didn't need the degree anymore. The company was growing faster than I could manage while taking classes. Jasmine became Sue. We hired a team of 20, then 50, then 200. Series A funding brought in $10 million. Series B, $80 million. The venture capitalists who'd once intimidated me now returned my calls within minutes. I was 22, worth $40 million on paper, and I still had nightmares about Denise locking me out of the house. Trauma doesn't care about your bank account. Year 3, we pivoted into B2B services, selling Finance Flow to corporations for employee financial wellness programs. That's when things went stratospheric. Fortune 500 companies were calling us. By 25, Finance Flow was valued at $500 million and I owned 38%. I bought a house in Oakland. Nothing ostentatious, just 3 bedrooms with a view and a security system that could probably defend a military base. Safety mattered more than size. I hadn't spoken to my father or Denise or the stepbrothers in 7 years. Not one phone call, text, or email. I changed my number, locked down my social media, and existed in their world as a ghost. Occasionally I'd Google them. Morbid curiosity. Dad still worked at the plant. Denise managed a dentist's office. Stephen had graduated from that expensive college with a marketing degree and a 2.4 GPA. Devin had dropped out after freshman year, moved back home. They were painfully, aggressively ordinary. Then our HR director, Patricia, forwarded me 3 applications for our new Atlanta office expansion. "Thought you should see these personally," her email said. Given the last names: Stephen Harris, Devin Harris, Denise Harris. I stared at my screen for 20 minutes, heart hammering against my ribs. They'd all applied to Finance Flow. Stephen for a senior marketing position, Devin for IT support, Denise for office management. Their resumes were exercises in inflation. Stephen claimed extensive brand strategy experience from his 3 mid-level jobs in 5 years. Devin listed technical proficiency from building gaming PCs. Denise touted her management expertise from bossing around dental hygienists. None of them had connected my extremely common first name with the CEO they'd never bothered learning about. Finance Flow's website showed my photo, but I looked different now. Professional hair, tailored clothes, confidence that radiated from every pore. Not the exhausted teenager they'd crushed. Patricia's note continued. Standard policy is to reject family applications to avoid conflicts of interest. However, these are weak enough to reject on merit alone. Your call. I made a different call entirely. I had them flown to San Francisco. Business class, nice hotel, the full corporate recruitment experience. Separately, of course. I didn't want them comparing notes before I'd had my fun. Stephen interviewed first on a Thursday morning. I watched via camera feed as he walked into the conference room, cocky in an ill-fitting suit. Our recruiter James was masterful. So, Stephen, tell me about your brand strategy experience. Stephen launched into buzzword soup, synergistic approaches, market penetration, consumer-centric narratives. James nodded politely, asked specific questions Stephen couldn't answer and watched him flounder. 45 minutes later, Stephen left looking deflated. Devon came Friday wearing a graphic tee to a corporate interview. James didn't even hide his disappointment. Your resume lists technical proficiency. Can you explain your experience with enterprise-level network security? Well, I mostly built gaming rigs and did some troubleshooting. Devon trailed off, realizing how inadequate that sounded. He lasted 20 minutes before James mercifully ended it. Denise arrived Monday morning, dressed in her power outfit, a pantsuit I recognized from 7 years ago, now slightly too tight. She had the audacity to critique our office decor while waiting. James brought her in and she immediately tried taking control. I've managed teams for 15 years, she announced. I know what works and what doesn't. This company could benefit from my experience. What's your experience with financial technology platforms? James asked. Technology is technology. Management principles are universal. I'd heard enough. I called James's cell, my number showing as unknown. Bring her to conference room C, I said. I'll handle this interview personally. I was sitting at the head of the table when Denise walked in, James trailing behind wearing a knowing smile. She was reviewing something on her phone, didn't look up immediately. I let the silence stretch, watching her, feeling that cold calculation I'd perfected over years. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Harris, I said, my voice perfectly professional. She glanced up. I watched recognition flicker across her face. Confusion, then dawning horror, then desperate attempts to mask it. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Laura, she finally whispered. Miss Harris, actually. Or Miss Jackson if we're being formal. I smiled and it wasn't kind. Though I understand you've been using Harris for your application. How's the family? Her composure shattered. We didn't know. That the teenager you exploited for free labor built a $500 million company? No, I imagine you didn't. Too busy spending Dad's money on Stephen's mediocre education and Devon's gaming habits. I leaned forward. Let me be clear. You're not getting this job. Neither are your sons. Your applications are being rejected as we speak. You can't. That's discrimination. It's not discrimination to reject unqualified candidates. Stephen has been fired from 3 jobs in 5 years for poor performance. Devon has no relevant experience. And you? I pulled up her resume on my laptop. You managed a dental office with 4 employees. We have 800 employees globally. You're catastrophically unqualified. Denise's face went red. Your father will hear about this. My father chose you over me every single day for 6 years. I don't particularly care what he hears. I stood gathering my tablet. But since you're here, let me tell you what happened after I left. I worked myself through college while building this company. I earned every single dollar in my bank account. I sleep easy knowing I didn't steal from children to fund my lifestyle. We gave you a home. You gave me a prison and called it family. There's a difference. I walked to the door, paused. You owe me approximately $42,000, by the way. Calculated hourly wages at legal minimums for the work I did, minus the pittance you let me keep. I've had my lawyers draw up documentation. You'll be served next week. Don't contact me again. I left her sitting there, shaking with rage or fear or both. It didn't matter. I had a company to run, a life to live, and a past I'd finally, conclusively closed the door on. Outside, James high-fived me. That was legendary. I smiled, real this time, not the calculated weapon I'd used on Denise. Make sure security escorts her out. And James? Send a fruit basket to my grandmother's grave. She'd have loved this. The revenge was everything I'd imagined. But the freedom, that was even better.